2014 Chevy Tahoe overheating issue. My friend called me and told me that the meter was going past the 210 range. Right here, it's going up to about 240, 250. Asked me to look at it. Just want to show you how I diagnosed it, what I found, what it took to replace it, and how I tested it. So I hooked up my OBD2 scanner. This one is a little more advanced, bi-directional commands, but I'll show you what I did. So I didn't trust this gauge necessarily. It has 180,000 on the vehicle, so it could be needing a calibration or replacement. So what I like to do is see what the computer is actually seeing. So when I diagnose, just do auto VIN. The gauge is nice to read, but if I can see what the computer is actually seeing digitally, then it'll give me a better understanding if it is actually overheating or if the gauge is just bad. So 2014 Tahoe has the VIN number, okay. System diagnose. Engine control module. All I'm going to look for is the ECT, or the engine control temperature, or engine coolant temperature, sorry. Live data, engine cooling and HVAC data. Okay. So I've already fixed the problem. It's not going to show it overheating, but I'll just walk you through what I found. So it is in Celsius, so just got to convert it to Fahrenheit, which is fine. This guy's at 17. I haven't started the vehicle today, so it is cold. But when I did start it, when it was overheating, it would go up to 111, which came out to I think it was around like 238 or 242 temperature, which was overheating. So I confirmed, okay, it is overheating. There is an issue. The gauge was not exactly on, so it did register overheating, but it wasn't the same of what the digital or the ECT sensor was seeing, but they were close enough. So I know I had an issue at that point. So I came over here and checked for the coolant. The reservoir was low or empty, so pretty much at the end of it, there was no coolant in the system. Why wasn't there coolant in the system? So I ended up getting a pressure gauge, which I have a full set. Pretty much unthread your lid. Thread this guy on, it's your adapter. Plug the hose onto it. I pump it up usually like around 14 psi. Once I hit around 10, I can hear a hissing noise, which was a leak. It ended up being, this is the new radiator, but it ended up being the old radiator in between these crimped ends where it has plastic and aluminum. It ended up leaking through there. So it has 180,000, might be the original radiator. It's probably due. A lot of heat cycles, expanding, then contracting, maybe cracks or the seals or the crimps. But it was leaking through there, so it was low on coolant, low coolant, no way to transfer the heat, engine overheats. Luckily they didn't overheat it enough to where it warped the head gaskets, so they were lucky on that behalf. I just want to walk you through what I did to replace the radiator. I think it's very simple. You have some experience, some tooling, could be easily done. Okay, so first off, you're gonna have to drain it. There's a little petcock or drain at the bottom right there. You'll just rotate that. It's kind of threaded in partially, and then drain the coolant. I do have these little nifty clamps that will go on the hose. I'll grab one of those right now. I recommend getting one if it's something that you'll be doing in the future. They're just like a clamp. Just put it on the hose and then clamp down. That'll kind of pinch it off and keep all the fluid retained in the engine instead of spilling everything out. You will still lose some, but not as much. Okay, so you got this top hose here. That's one. And there is a few more on this side. So you have a small one on top. You have the transmission cooler line, which It's kind of hard to see, but right there you have another coolant line there, and then another transmission cooler line at the bottom, plus you have your main cooler line, which is that large one. You can't get the best angles, but they're just hose clamps, and then you have a little clip for your transmission cooler lines. One thing to keep in mind, they make two different radiators for this vehicle. One has engine cooler and transmission cooler, and the other just has transmission cooler. If you have the engine cooler type, which one this one does not, you're going to have additional cooler lines coming off this side for the engine. Since this type does not have that, I only have cooler lines on the right side, which are for the transmission. Those have like a small C-clip, which you'll have to remove that little plastic band. If we can get in there. The little plastic band right there will just pop back. There's a little C-clip. I recommend getting a pick and kind of working it out, then maybe grabbing it with some pliers, because they will spring off, and then you'll have to look for them. Okay. Next, there's a bolt here, which is for your radiator. A bolt here, which is for the fan shroud. And then same over here. You're going to have two bolts, one for your fan, one for your radiator. You're going to have two electrical connectors, which one is there for that fan, and then one is going to be over there for that fan. Once you remove those two, you can pull the shroud out of here. There's a couple clips which you can just kind of pry up with like a screwdriver or a little pry bar. Then the plastic shroud will actually remove completely out. Then the radiator will come out as well, and then install the new radiator. Put the hoses back together, put the shroud back in there. I took this piece off. Do you have to? Maybe not, but I would recommend it because it's only a couple screws, couple clamps. It opens up a lot of clearance in this area for you. It'll be a lot easier to work. You don't have to struggle or fight it out of there. Once I get everything in there, if you do have a pressure gauge, before you even put any fluid in there, I would highly recommend to test the pressure on it. Because at this point, it's going to tell you if you have a leak. And you don't want to go and dump in brand new coolant that cost you money, and then to find out you have a leak and you just waste it, or you're trying to reclaim it as it's leaking out. So one thing I've learned, test this first, and it will tell you if you have a leak. I'll pump it up to what, 14 psi ish, leave it there for maybe 5 minutes, come back. If it's at 14, you're good. So that's that. Then go ahead and top everything off to the proper level. Then I would run it, let it go through a few heat cycles, the fans kick on, and I'll turn it off. This is the next morning, so I did top it off to the cold mark. It says right there, full cold, so I topped that off. Okay, everything's good. Another little quick tool to use, which I would recommend, you can either go loan it at one of the auto parts store or go pick one up. They're fairly cheap. I think for under 30 bucks you can get everything. But this is a block tester, which is really nice to have. I ended up buying one because I just wanted one for purposes like this. But the fluid that I have is like a blue type of fluid. I think Harbor Freight has it for 10 bucks or so. You're gonna put this inside this chamber right here up to the fill line. You're gonna come over here while the vehicle's running. Go ahead and kind of seat that and seal it. Vehicle's running, you have the fluid in there, it's blue. You're gonna have this little pump ball. It's gonna create like a vacuum and has a little check valve. Go ahead and just place it on top. You're just gonna squeeze down, release. You're gonna see a lot of bubbles come up from in here up through the fluid. What it's looking for is combustible gases from your coolant that will go and make contact to that fluid, and it'll react. It's going to start turning like a yellowish or green. If you do, I try to do maybe 10 or 15 times, which is probably plenty for the test, but if it stays blue, you know at least the head gaskets or the combustible gases are not leaking into the motor from like a head gasket or cracked head, warped head, cracked block. Some way the gases from the chambers are not leaking into the coolant side. It's a good test and it's fairly inexpensive. So I performed that at the end since I knew that it was overheated a couple times. Just a precaution, which checked out good. So everything's installed, fluid's topped off, system is burped, I suppose, no air bubbles, topped it off. So I came back to my OBD2 scanner. Remember, this was going up to like 111, 113. I can hear the fans kick on, which I can do a bidirectional scan on here, which confirmed they were working as far as the outputs of the computer to it, but they were also kicking it on based on the ECT and whatever parameters the manufacturer put into the computer. So that was all working. They would go up to about 113. This was with no coolant in there before I replaced anything, and the temperature would not drop with the fans on. Why? No coolant going through the radiator, no way to expel that heat to transfer, so the heat would just keep heating up or stay the same. Now I cannot get this over 89, which is good. It's kind of cooler outside. Fans kick on, this will drop immediately, which everything's working. I've already test drove it. I've hold the revs around 2500 RPM. It goes up, I hear the fans kick on, it drops down. So everything looks good. Doesn't look like the engine was damaged from overheating. I think it only happened twice. They noticed it, they pulled over, which was good. They didn't continue to run it. Yeah, and it just ended up being a radiator that had a small hole or crack or failed seal right here at the crimp. And that was about it. Radiator was about 300. Fluid, I bought the Dex Cool specifically for GM, and that was about 50 bucks. And I had the other tooling, so I would say 2 hours of work, $350. And yeah, everything else looks good. So I hope this helps someone out.